Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, you know this man right here. That is the Hall of Famer himself, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. What's going on, Ted?
Hey, I feel like $1 million today. You know, I'm healthy. I'm, and I guess there's some kind of flu bug going around and something. So I need to make sure I take all my vitamin C and take care of myself. So, but right now I'm good.
Well, I know you got a lot of kids running around that house. I've got a toddler here at my house, and man, it's that preschool she goes to. It's like Germ City. She comes home and brings them all with her. So that's why our sponsor AG1 is so important. Use that, get all your vitamins and minerals right there.
Yeah.
But it's not time for an ad read right now. Right now, Ted, it's time to resume our look back at WCW in 1996. We're going to be picking up where we left off with our discussion now about October of that year. Man, there is so much to discuss. We've got 4 videos this week that we'll be watching, so it's going to be a fun one. And plus, it's Halloween Havoc month, so that's always a blast. Before we get into it, though, I have to do my usual reminder, my shtick here. Get over to youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Get subscribed to become eligible for an upcoming giveaway. Ted just had a new WWE Elite Legends action figure come out, and I picked one up over at Target. I'm going to ship it over to Ted, and we are going to do a giveaway with that sucker. So if you want to make sure that you can get your hands on it, all you have to do to be eligible is subscribe at YouTube. Again, it's youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod.
I don't have it yet.
All right, I'll go pick up another one so you can have it. So it's October 1996, WCW, of course. A lot of big stuff going on, including some pretty notable arrivals. Behind the scenes, JJ Dillon arrives with the company in an office role. He had just left the WWF, where he had been in various management roles behind the scenes, including VP of Talent Relations for years. A role in which he claims credit for the signings of huge talents like The Undertaker and Triple H. Ted, how well did you know JJ, and did you feel like bringing a guy like him with his experience was a huge benefit to WCW, or just another cook being added to the kitchen?
No, I thought it was definitely something. I mean, because I've known JJ Dillon. The first time I saw him, he was a wrestler, and I can still remember the first match I watched him have in the Amarillo Sports Arena. He and Dick Murdoch had an unbelievable, they worked together. They worked a program, a whole program. And JJ was he was the villain. He was the heel, and Murdoch was the baby face. And I'm telling you, and then I'll be honest with you, one of my very first matches was with him, with JJ Dillon.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, down in Abilene, I believe it was, and I can't remember why. I said, shoot, somebody didn't show up or whatever. And so instead of being a referee, I had this match with him, and it was easy. It was easy because he was very good at what he did and led me through it. So, I forgot. You know what? I forgot that.
How about that?
My very first match was with JJ Dillon.
So not even necessarily one of your early matches. You think you had your first match ever with JJ?
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
That is incredible. Well, Arn Anderson says it about him all the time. He was the manager for the Four Horsemen, but he would get in there and wrestle every once in a while. And Arn always says, like, man, nobody could take a bump like JJ Dillon.
Yeah, and he was great. I mean, as a wrestler, he was very good. I mean, he was a heel in Amarillo. And again, the program that he had with Dick Murdoch was just second to none. And I mean, I've known him that far back. A great guy, and personably, he's a great guy.
I've had the pleasure of meeting him on a couple of occasions, and I back that up. He's certainly a great guy, and yeah, I mean, what an incredible talent, and for him to transition from being like, hey, this great worker and great bumper to all of a sudden being a great manager, and
Yeah,
now here in WCW, he's behind the scenes initially, but then he's going to become WCW commissioner. He's great in that role. It's man, it's a versatile talent, isn't he?
yeah, yeah. He could do it all.
I think it's also worth mentioning that in the 10/14/1996 Observer, Meltzer mentions that there's a lot of behind the scenes heat among Hall, Nash, and Hogan, with Hall and Nash already getting tired of their backup roles and frustrated with the amount of money that Hulk was making. Ted, as a member of the group, you're around all these guys a lot. Do you remember any kind of tension starting to brew among everybody?
Well, it wasn't. I guess it wasn't something that was obvious to everybody, but yeah, I knew about it, and it's kind of like anybody that comes along, and again, Kevin, Kevin and Scott, they are relative newcomers, and they're looking to prove themselves and get the opportunity. And of course, you're there. If you're the guy at the top, there's always somebody looking to knock you off the top.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I guess politically at that time, Hogan also. I mean, Hogan had been Hulk Hogan. I mean, he'd been Hulk Hogan for the WWF forever, and was the feature guy when Vince McMahon went national and global with his company. And yeah, it's like everybody would want that spot. And of course, this is a time now where Hogan has left the WWE and gone over. And I guess, yeah, I mean, Scott and Kevin are like, okay, when's my opportunity?
Now, Hall and Nash, while we're on the subject, they're kind of noted shit disturbers behind the scenes. And I think I've even heard Kevin Nash say that, they were pretty giddy about the amount of money they were making coming in the door here from WWF, and they were happy to let everybody backstage know exactly what they were making, which is a substantial amount more than most of the rest of the folks were making.
Yeah.
Do you remember those two kind of stirring the pot behind the scenes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like like waving it in front of you, like right. Look what I'm making and you're not. But for me though, personally, by this time, I didn't have to worry about that anymore because I was a manager.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a managing role, and so no, I wasn't gonna let that bother me.
So that's interesting, Ted, because you're in a management role, but you're like you're coming from being a wrestler, so I'm sure you still consider yourself one of the boys.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So now, with that being the case, are you able to avoid like the backstage drama, or I mean, like you're around these guys all the time? Are you like, if in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, it feels like it would be really hard to stay out of the backstage drama that's going to happen pretty much anywhere you go. Did you manage to stay away from it here?
Well, the reason I was able to stay away from it is because number one, I think I had the respect of everybody for who I had been and the talent that I had, and now I'm getting to be one of the older guys, and I'm now in a managing role, which is it serves some importance, but it's not of major importance. And I believe that's why if I was still in a wrestling role, yeah, I'd have been in the middle of that mix. But if I was, if I had still been in an active wrestling role, I don't think I ever would have left the WWF.
So as a manager, you don't feel like you're doing that kind of scraping and clawing, trying to get to the top of the mountain anymore. You're like, hey, I'm a manager. Here's my role, and here's my salary, and I'm satisfied. And that was it, right?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, well, that's the other thing is that when I went to WCW, It's the first time I was on a guaranteed contract.
Mm-hmm.
And whether I was there or I wasn't there, I got paid. And that's another reason for me not to care.
Pretty easy to be content under those circumstances.
Yeah, I've got my money is guaranteed. I'm not physically wrestling anymore. I'm in this manager's role. You guys go fight and have it out, and I'll just sit back here and watch.
Pretty good spot to be in.
Yeah.
Well, something else that I saw in the Observer was that this is around the time when Bischoff is kind of calling meetings with a lot of the talent and outlining goals. And a lot of those goals were to put Vince out of business or to outdo Vince on shows. I mean, some of these became pretty infamous meetings whenever, they would reach the Observer because of some of the content of what Bischoff would say about putting people out of business and ending Vince McMahon's, reign of terror up there with the WWF. Do you have any recollection of being in any of these kind of wild meetings?
Oh, I mean, I heard it all, and I'll be honest with you. I just kept my mouth shut and watched, and oftentimes laughed. I said, nobody's going to put a Vince McMahon out of business, and especially someone who knows nothing about the wrestling business. And I'm sorry, but at the time, in my opinion, Eric Bischoff didn't know squat about wrestling.
I know that Eric would solicit advice from like Hogan, Hall, Nash, a lot of the guys that were on top, Savage for another example. Would he ever come to you? I mean, nobody knows more about the business than you by this point.
Like I said, again, I came there in a managing role, and I managed to stay out of the way. and let me say this. I have nothing against Eric Bischoff, and he's personally a very nice guy, and I never asked him how he did it, but I still wonder how he did it. I was like, how did you end up, being the guy in charge of this? And, because it's like, until I went there, I'd never heard of Eric Bischoff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't a recognizable name in wrestling.
Not necessarily a good fit on paper. However, I mean, the proof is in the pudding for Eric Bischoff. I mean, yes, WCW would eventually tank, but I mean, he took over, and I think it was 93. And
well, I mean, okay, but the biggest angle in wrestling ended up being the war.
Mm-hmm.
Here's all these guys that had been with Vince that have now jumped away from Vince and are now working for the competition.
Right.
That was the biggest story in wrestling.
Well, Ted, our first clip this week, we're dropping in on the October 14th Nitro, as it seems a couple of new members might be joining the group. Let's have a look.
I know this will sound stupid. I don't even want to bother you with it. But, lack of communication around here. But on the contract that Ted gave us, about the limousine and the Learjets, and most of all, the money with the decimal point where it should be a little further back, that we should be getting the money, what I'm talking about. I don't know if it's just a screw up. I know it probably blew, you have nothing about it, but,
No, brother, that should all be in there. Turn the page. Where's my signature? No, the Learjets, the limousines, the money on the paper, that should all, whoa. I mean, I didn't sign that. Do you see my signature on that? You know something, brother? I didn't sign this. So this isn't a contract I laid out, but you shouldn't have these shirts on unless I sign this. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what the hell are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is you don't wear our colors unless we tell you.
Unbelievable.
Take care of the family business for me. How do you like that, Liz?
Unbelievable. You don't wear the colors unless we tell you?
Hold this. Trillionaire Ted.
See, he suckered those two nasties into watching.
Tag him.
Elegant six.
Tag 'em.
They're unconscious. The Nasty Boys. And why I may not like what they did here, attempting to join the NWO, quite frankly.
They deserve it.
This is a little... This is too much. This is too much.
NWO, brothers. You know something, Macho Man? What you see here, Macho Man, is just a little bit of what I'm gonna do to you, brother. At the MGM, brother. Halloween Havoc. Giant, bring her over here, man. Bring her over here.
Get her out of there.
You know something, Macho Man? The reason your life fell apart
Entire
is
arena
because of
on its
Hollywood
feet.
Hogan. The reason I'm going to remain the NWO champion is because there's a pecking order, and I'm the greatest in the sport, brother. And the bottom line is, before your marriage was destroyed, night and day, Elizabeth dreamed about me. She had me on a pedestal.
All right. So, Ted, that kind of stuff is what really got the NWO red hot, because it was really starting to turn from like a faction into more of like a gang, like this sort of thing. Like, you know, talking about putting on colors and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the Nasty Boys, Ted, they couldn't have been more different from your performance style. We also always hear how absolutely crazy those guys could be behind the scenes. What were your experiences like around those two?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just that just, you know, like yeah. yeah. Enough said. They're just ridiculous sometimes.
You're trying to think of a story that you can tell, and there's maybe none.
I'm trying to think of one, and I don't think I can find one.
That's all right. I won't hold your feet to the fire on it. Something else that stands out to me here is Hogan's statements at the end to Savage about Liz. We all know that in real life, Hogan and Savage had a real love-hate relationship, and rumor has it that Liz was at the center of their issues. Now here we are, and it's being turned into a storyline. What do you think about this blending of reality and storyline?
Well, I don't know, and I'll be honest with you. Back then, at that time, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of what was going on.
Really?
No. You know, I didn't, and I didn't want to know, to be honest with you. You know, like I didn't delve into that. I mean, and nobody, obviously I knew Hulkster and I knew Savage, and but it wasn't one of those things. I didn't know either one of them well enough to sit down and have a conversation like that with them.
And again, you know, it's the businessman in you. It's like, hey, if I don't have to be in the middle of drama, I'm not going to insert myself into it. So
exactly.
On the next episode of Nitro, yourself and the NWO are ringside for a match between the fake Sting and Mr. JL when real Sting comes out with a very different look and attacks fake Sting. None of the NWO guys try to stop him, and instead, you take the mic and give Sting an offer. Let's check it out.
Hold on, no, come on.
Well, let's give a great big warm welcome to the real Stinger.
No!
He's with him. He is with him.
And you
No
know,
way.
Sting, the NWO would like to give you a warm welcome too. We'd like to welcome you aboard. See, we could use a man like you.
No.
Whether you realize it or not, or whether WCW realizes it or not, the NWO is taking over. That is a fact. You understand?
He's not wearing NWO. He's not wearing
We
their
are
colors.
here to
He's
stay.
not wearing that NWO. Look at his
There's nothing
face.
anybody can do about it.
Look at his
And you
eyes.
see, if you join us, it's not like going to work for any other company. No, once you join us, then you're like family.
You got something to say to Sting, big man?
Stinger, if I may quote my most favorite American poet, Jim Morrison, I think it's time you break on through to the other side.
Don't do it.
I got a couple of questions for Sting. You've been carrying the WCW banner for 9 years and doing a great job. What do you got to show for it? We bring him out, a bogus imposter, and nobody knows about that better than us. Because we knew it would get to you. WCW tells you to stick it. We want you to know we're taking over, and with you, there's no stopping us. You jump NWO, you're NWO for life.
Come on, Stinger. Come on, Stinger.
He's done.
Come on.
They brought the devil out of him. He reached down.
That right there is your cheap imitation. You get what you pay for, don't you? The real Sting may or may not be in your price range. But the only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure.
Pretty good storytelling, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
And really, at this point, I think that that's kind of what's setting WCW apart from WWE. You know, WWE had kind of this emphasis on cartoonish, crazy, outlandish characters and storylines at this time. And then you flip the channel to WCW, and there's like gang violence, and there's this kind of storytelling. I mean, what do you think, Ted? Is that kind of what made the difference during the Monday Night War?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but I know this. I know that this one big thing with all these guys who without them even thinking about it, owe the fact that they're a wrestling star to Vince McMahon. Mm. All of those, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, all those guys, Hulk, me, all those guys, the thing that put them on the map, the thing that made them a recognizable character was Vince McMahon of the WWF.
Yep.
And so, now these guys are jumping ship for whatever reason and going to do their own thing. Okay. The one thing that Vince McMahon was still able to do was create new characters.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But there were no new characters being created in WCW. You follow me?
At least none that were really hitting, until Goldberg.
Well, exactly, because they didn't know how.
Until Goldberg came along, they had like Glacier and some of these other guys come along, and it just was not working. But you're right. It's Vince McMahon, he put somebody on his TV. That's automatically somebody, where in WCW, maybe not necessarily the case.
And to that point, once that angle, that initial surprise, all these established WWF stars are now WCW stars. Well, now do something with them. Mm-hmm. Now, to make this, and they didn't have that.
Outside of the NWO, a lot of these guys that they were bringing in
what's your next big deal?
Yep. If you come in and you're part of the NWO, okay, you've got a really juicy storyline you can sink your teeth into. Anybody else, they struggled. They struggled to do anything with them.
Yeah.
And they would down the road when they brought Bret Hart in. They brought Bret Hart on board, and they didn't know what to do with him. And next thing you know, it's like his creative is all screwed up.
Yeah.
Well, look, I also want to talk about the new look for Sting. It's not quite dialed in just yet. He kind of looks like some kind of a weird mime here, Ted. But your mentor, Terry Funk, evolved himself. Chris Jericho and The Undertaker have also become known for changing and adapting to the times. And now Sting is doing the same thing with himself to kind of adjust to this new standard in wrestling. Did you feel like there was any difference or evolution in your character between the $1 Million Man and now NWO Ted DiBiase, or did there not really need to be?
I never really thought about that. I mean, I knew, again, it was, even though I was there, and of course, obviously, I still want to be a part of the business, have exposure and what have you. The thing that was more on my mind than wrestling, even at that time, was this new relationship with God and me going out and being a speaker and, if you will, a minister and ministering to people. This was all happening during that time. And that was, like I said, that's why I told them. I said, you guys probably need to turn me babyface because people are going to be seeing a lot more of me on Christian television, and the two don't mix. So I had a guaranteed contract. I showed up and I did what I was asked, and because I wasn't a wrestling talent anymore, I didn't really worry about it.
Now, that kind of brings up an interesting point in my mind, Ted. You had just come from the WWF earlier that year, and Jake Roberts had debuted in the WWF with a very, very different character from what he had been previously. Now, all of a sudden, he is a born-again Christian character, and he's preaching the word of the Lord on WWF television. And it makes me wonder, I mean, at any point, even in the next year, whenever you have this conversation with Eric, like, hey, maybe you ought to turn me babyface, did you ever consider bringing your faith onto wrestling TV or pitching the idea?
No, you mean with Eric?
Yeah.
No.
Do you think that Eric would have been receptive to it if you had come to him and said, like, hey, I'd like to bring, more of a faith-based character onto TV as a babyface manager?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Why not? Do you think it's just because he was going edgy?
I don't know. And personally at the time, I didn't care.
Ah.
I mean, it was kind of like I was at a point, and it's hard for me to explain this, Marcus. It was almost like, okay, I've got this contract. I'm committed to it. I've got a guaranteed contract. I'm going to do my best to do what they want me to do until this contract's over. But at no time did I even consider the possibility of renewing that contract, because
I'm with
my direction, it was like I was there physically, but I wasn't there mentally.
Okay, now we're kind of starting to dig into it, where it's like, yep, you're involved in this hot angle and you're on TV, you're getting tons of exposure, but your heart is not there anymore because now your mind is in a different direction with your faith.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And again, when I left there, when my contract was, well, I told Eric, I basically said, look, I said, here's the deal, guys. I said, you got me over here, and I told Eric this. I said, you got me over here. I'm part of this deal. I said, I'm going out here week after week. I'm standing in a corner with my thumb up my ass. I got nothing to say. And I said, I didn't spend all this time developing a character and a personality, and a position in this business to come along and just be Hulk Hogan's belt bearer.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have any other ideas for me, just send me home.
And that's how it went.
And that's how it went. And I didn't care. I didn't care because they still had to pay me. And now I could refocus all my attention on the ministry.
All right. See, as I'm watching this, as a wrestling fan and a Ted DiBiase fan, I'm like, how cool is this? Like, Ted DiBiase, he's in the NWO. He's involved in this red hot angle. I bet he was having a blast. But here in reality, you're like, nah, I think I'd rather be doing, something with my faith outside of wrestling.
Yeah.
Interesting. Hey, by the way, go ahead.
And that's what I did,
Yep. You were out of wrestling after your contract would expire here in WCW for a number of years before you go back to the WWF and that behind the scenes role we discussed.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, we just talked about Sting, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. He just announced that he would be retiring from wrestling in 2024 after nearly 40 years as an active wrestler. He's still on TV with AEW to this day, and he still wrestles and takes some crazy risks, like jumping off of ladders, going through tables. He's 64 years old doing that.
Yeah.
So Ted, what do you think it is about Sting that made him resonate so strongly with fans for all these years? Anything in particular stick out?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, he's just one of those guys that he got over and he stayed over, and he knew how to, you know, and he knew how to position himself and stay in a place where he, you know, wouldn't be hurt, I guess. And it just, you know, he became an iconic figure because, you know, like again, he was with WCW all the way.
Yeah, didn't end up going to the WWF until much later in his career.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting here too, Ted, is I don't know if you've ever talked to Sting about faith, but you know, Sting has talked about.
Hey.
You have?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, Steve and I together, and we went to a lot of ministry things together, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. It's kind of like it was kind of like you know, it's something like he said to me one time. He says, I never knew you had that in you.
Wow.
You know, so yeah, I mean, yeah, we got pretty close there for a while, you know. I mean, we're still friends when we see each other, but you know, just people go their own way.
It's just interesting because you know you revealed here that your heart just wasn't really with it, and Sting has mentioned before that you know it's actually during around this time, maybe a year or two later, you know he's involved in this really hot angle, and you know he's coming down from like a helicopter at Club La Vila, and it's like all this crazy spectacle, and he's at the center of it, and all the fans adore him, but he was like, but I was miserable, and I wasn't happy personally or professionally. And here, what he was lacking was God in his life.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool and interesting that you two kind of found yourselves walking the same path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, back into the action here. We're at Halloween Havoc. The event set an all-time record for live gate and merch sales, bringing nearly $225,000 in ticket sales and nearly $70,000 in merch. I know you'd end up getting frustrated here in WCW, and certainly your heart's not all the way in it, but it had to feel pretty good to be something or part of something this red hot, right?
Yeah. Okay. It was like, hey, Marcus, by that time, I was like, I don't care.
You were just like over it, and it's like, yeah, whatever.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
At Halloween Havoc, you're acting as kind of like an NWO master of ceremonies. You're standing in the crowd cutting promos and introducing NWO matches. You get involved in the match between Hogan and Savage, giving Hogan a weapon, then also pulling Randy out of the ring so that the Giant could attack him, which would lead to Hogan getting the win. After Hogan retains, there's another huge debut that happens here at Halloween Havoc. Let's have a look.
Don't even think about it. Hi. So you're bored, are you? I've come here to break your monotony. Hey, Sprout, why don't you just head back with a Jolly Green Giant and take a break?
Whoa. You know what, Mr. Piper? There's a big lack of communication here because when I said that I made wrestling, when I said that own wrestling and I control wrestling. Now that I really think about it, I remember that you and I were running neck and neck.
Why don't you shut up for a second? It's my turn.
Be careful.
I am not here to represent the WCW, the NWA, the SPCA, the SOB, although I can be one SOB when I want to be.
Be careful. Be real careful.
Yeah, I made a lot of money being real careful. I'll tell you something there, Charlie Brown. You've been saying that if it wasn't for you, professional wrestling wouldn't be what it is today. Boy, do I got news for you. I come to you for a reality check there, partner. I come because, you see, I'm just as big an icon in this sport as you are.
All right. Man, he is a scene stealer, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, what a massive addition to the WCW roster. You've got Roddy Piper. What do you think of him arriving for this red hot product here?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a shot in the arm for sure. I mean, and again, everything Roddy just said is pretty much the truth. And I personally, I love that guy. I had a good time with him, and he was. I mean, here's a guy who was just. As a matter of fact, he and I were at Madison Square Garden the same time. This is the first time I ever. I think it was. I think it was the. It wasn't the first time I wrestled in the Garden. I think it was going to be my last match in the Garden as I was leaving there the first time when Vince Sr. was still alive. And I can't remember what year that was. It had to be like 77 or
1979.
79.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the first time I saw Roddy.
Now, was that because I believe it was in the Garden, and I know that Vince Sr. was still running the show. Was that the infamous time when Roddy Piper made his debut, and I think it was Freddie Blassie stuffed his bagpipes with toilet paper so they wouldn't play?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
I mean, that is a really mean rib on a guy just coming in the door.
No kidding. Yeah.
It set Piper back a few years too, where he wasn't able to. He lost his job that night. It didn't work out, and it took him a few years to get back to that stage. So, yeah, kind of a mean thing to do to a young guy.
Yeah.
Well, he's not a young guy here. At this time, Piper's 42, Hogan is 43, and Savage turns 44 the next month. Meltzer was very critical of the match between Hogan and Savage here, even saying that it was the ghost of Hulk Hogan that defeated the corpse of Randy Savage. So a little stiff in his review of it. You've spoken openly here on the show about your desire to retire by 40 because of the way that your father passed away in the ring.
Yeah.
But here you are, here are your contemporaries working against one another beyond the age of 40. What did you think of their continued involvement in wrestling?
Well, it's to each their own. I mean, again, my dad was 45, and there's a lot of things they know now, in terms of the body and ways to. I would say, in our day of modern medicine, the fact that my dad's arteries were, like as bad as they were, could be detected today. Back then, they couldn't do that. I mean, when they autopsied my dad, they said one of his main arteries to his heart was almost totally full of crap. I mean, it's like this the passageway of the artery, which is maybe this big, was like a pinhole for the blood to get through. And anyway. But yeah, I mean, I just made a promise to myself that I would not stay too long. And I've seen other guys. I mean, hey, one of my biggest heroes is Terry Funk.
Mm-hmm.
And my gosh, Terry wrestled until he was almost 70.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes, and he would be here in WCW a few years later, taking crazy risks. I think in like his late 50s or early 60s.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, but I mean, just a personal decision, that I would not. And then there's a lot of guys now. Terry continued to look good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he didn't look like a washed up old man getting in the ring. I don't think.
And he wasn't trying to come out there and be this flashy technical wrestler by the later stages either. He was like, okay, I'm getting older, I'm gonna change my style. Now I'm a brawler, and he would come out and brawl with people and have hardcore matches, and it kind of worked.
Yeah.
Ted, the next year at Halloween Havoc '97, Piper and Hogan are going to face each other in a cage match. So they're even a year older than they are here, of course, and that match would be dubbed "The Age in the Cage," just because of the age of these two guys climbing into there. I mean, do you think that featuring veteran talents against one another is the right approach, or should they have been paired with younger guys who can bounce around for them?
I don't know. It depends. I guess it would depend on the situation. Of course, I mean, where the fans are concerned, you get a couple of guys. Again, you get a Hogan and a
Piper
who are, relatively the same age, and that's interesting. An older guy with a younger guy. I don't know.
They might not have the same chemistry, older guy and a younger guy, right?
Yeah.
Something to think about. Well, the next night on Nitro, a big focus is, of course, on the recap of Halloween Havoc as they try to push for that purchase of the replay. You'll come out with Hogan at the end of the show as he cuts a promo on Savage before finishing up with a statement about Piper. Let's have a look at our final clip this week.
If there was ever any question in anybody's mind who the superstar of the 90s is, who is at the top of the pecking order, it was only proved when one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, the rowdy one, that little red-haired stepchild, Roddy Piper, came out and was man enough to admit that he always idolized Hulk Hogan and couldn't even lace up my boots. And when I looked in Piper's eyes, after he kept admiring my accomplishments, I saw the fear in his eyes, and as he turned his skirt and ran, that was the best decision of his life. And now, Mr. DiBiase, now that I've held up my end of the bargain and the NWO for life, as soon as we get done doing what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go party with the Big Brother, Vince, and the new champs, the Outsiders. Tell them what I've been waiting to do, Mr. DiBiase.
We'll be in the business, man, that we are. Hollywood and I decided a long time ago that we wouldn't do this until we had taken care of business and firmly established the foundation of the NWO. And since we have the World Heavyweight title, the World Tag Team titles, the U.S. Heavyweight title, I think that foundation has been done. So for all you NWO loyals who would love to be entertained by Hollywood, tonight's the night. So Hollywood, go ahead, entertain them, brother.
Okay. So it's gonna end it like that's how the final Nitro of October that year goes off the air, is with Hogan doing like a dance and like a pose down. It's pretty weird stuff. But up until that moment, I mean, you guys they're booking heat in WCW, and NWO is holding all the gold. And you guys are being really antagonistic. And of course, we hear that Kevin Sullivan was the booker at the time, and nobody booked heat like Kevin. Had you spent much time around Kevin Sullivan in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Kevin for years, and and he and I, it's like Kevin doesn't get along with just everybody, and uh, he's the kind of guy. He's gonna kind of feel you out before he allows himself to get too close. That's the way I kind of read him, and I always, the guy's a sharp guy. I thought he was really sharp, as a matter of fact, and I never had any problem with Kevin.
Now, his style is heel territory. Heels on top, babyface chasing. You had just come from the WWF, babyface on top with heels chasing. Which is your preference for a territory, Ted?
Well, again, it's I'm old school. It's kind of like the reason that like you take the guys that were NWA world champion, Harley Race, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe, all those guys. When they would go into a territory, they would go all the way around and they would wrestle the top baby face. Because it's because all the people in the crowd want to see their hero beat him.
Yes.
So the heel is the champion and the baby face is chasing.
You like that approach?
Yes.
I like that approach too, because it's more entertaining. Like, man, is this babyface finally going to get it away from this bastard? And then when he finally does, it's like the big pop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Ted, also during that promo, I couldn't help but notice that you're not getting a lot of time on the mic, even though you were brought in to kind of be the mouthpiece for the group. You're here getting guaranteed money. It's less dates, as we've discussed, which means more time at home, and that's great. Plus, again, you're part of the hottest angle, which maybe didn't quite mean.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like I didn't have to say a whole lot. I mean, everybody knew who I was. Everybody, I'd already established a reputation in the industry. So, I wasn't worried. I mean, it was kind of like, it'd be different if I was in the heat of the match. Mm-hmm. If I'm one of the guys wrestling whoever and doing whatever, but that was not my position. And so I was just, like I said, I had my money, I had my position, and it was a comfortable one, and I enjoyed it.
I thought it kind of worked too, because
sometimes less is more.
Yeah, and you're in the role of the financial backer here. You cut a promo every once in a while. You'll help out on commentary every once in a while. So, like, I don't know. I thought it kind of worked. That was one of the criticisms I was seeing online. Is like Ted's barely even talking here. It's like he's getting his opportunities. Plus, it's that's his role, and it works. Well, Ted, I think what we're doing here is working. This look back at WCW, and we're going to continue the fun next month with another look with November of 1996 in the World War III pay-per-view. Before we go, I want to remind you guys, if you'd like to get this podcast early with no commercials, you've got to go to premierstreamingnetwork.com and sign up for Premier Plus. Tons of content over there, lots of wrestling podcasts. RVD's doing one over there right now, and RVD just debuted not long ago on AEW television. So if you definitely want to hear what that guy has to say, because he's still active and what a career he's had. Again, it's premierstreamingnetwork.com. Sign up for Premier Plus. Not to mention, Ted, if I recall right, I believe he once kissed your boots.
RVD?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, and what's funny is years later when he actually broke in, and then he told me the story. I mean, it was kind of like, and I think it was he was in he lived somewhere up way up in Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. Is where he's from.
Battle Creek,
and we had done a show up there, and he came in the ring, and he kissed my feet for the money, and I remember one of the times I saw him later, I said, hey buddy, I said, I've got another foot. I've got another foot for you to kiss if you want. And he said, but this time, Ted, it'd be a lot more expensive.
Man, I love RVD. RVD. What a great
Yeah,
personality.
he's a
he has.
good guy. He's a great guy.
He is hilarious, and my brother Dominic is the co-host for that podcast with him, and the two of them have great chemistry. So seriously, guys, if you like what we're doing, check their podcast out too.
And hey, please tell him I said hello.
We certainly will. And
Okay.
guys, if you're enjoying our show and you're listening on your podcast app, do us a favor, take a moment, like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. That helps Ted and I out a bunch. We'll be back for more next week, but in the meantime, we'd love to have you follow us on social media at Ted DiBiase Pod on all social media platforms. Follow our guy Ted here at MDM Ted DiBiase on all of his social media. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on X, and follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on X and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. All right, man. Another look back at WCW is in the books. This was a lot of fun today.
You bet. And as always, before I go, I must remind everybody that everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
See you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.